Singularity.
Hello everyone, my name is Nicola, aka Socrates, and as always, I will be the man with the questions. By the way, you guys are all watching Singularity One-on-One, which is a regular podcast feature of Singularity weblog. And if you enjoy the show, please help me make it better. You can do so by one of two things. You can, one, go to iTunes and write a review for the show. Or number two, you can simply go to our donations page and make a donation. My guest today on this show is Giulio Prisco. Giulio is an Italian information technology virtual reality consultant, as well as a writer, futurist, and transhumanist. Formerly a senior manager in the European Space Agency, Giulio Prisco is a physicist and computer scientist. He is an advocate of cryonics and contributes to the science and technology online magazine Tendencias 21. He produces Telexcelerate, is that how you say it?
Yes.
Telexcelerate? Finally I got it. An online talk program using virtual reality and video conferencing and focused on highly imaginative science and technology. Giulio is also a member of the advisory board of the Lifeboat Foundation and a founding member of the Order of Cosmic Engineers and the Turing Church, fledgling organizations which claim that the benefits of technological singularity, which would come from accelerating change, should or would be viable alternatives to the promises of major religious groups. So after this introduction, hi Giulio, I'm very happy to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Nicola, and I'm very happy to be on the show. I have been an admirer of your work for a long time.
Thank you very much. And speaking of admirers and viewers, I should give credit at the very beginning here to Catarina, Kryonica, who is one of my show's listeners and viewers, and who actually suggested that I do this interview with you today. So thank you, Catarina. I really appreciate your suggestions. Okay, so let's jump right into the interview here with the first question, which is, Giulio, can you tell us a little bit more about when, how, and why you got interested in issues such as transhumanism and the technological singularity?
It was a very long time ago. It was actually almost 50 years ago. And I was a child at that time. I'm one of those who can really say to have been a transhumanist forever. Now, what happens was that I remember it very well. I was about 5 or 6, and my mother took me to the beach. But she wanted to have some quiet time, so she gave me books to read to keep me quiet. She gave me some children books, of course, but sometimes she didn't have any children book to give me. So she gave me some of the same science fiction book that she used to read herself. My mother was really an avid reader of science fiction. And it so happened that some of those books was very good. For example, I remember reading Childhood's End of Sir Arthur C. Clarke when I was like 6, and
Wow.
those books really blew up my mind. I have been a transhumanist ever since. The ideas that I have now, I had exactly the same ideas when I was a child, and after that a teenager. Of course, at that time I was not able to express my ideas very well. And of course, I did not know that there was such a thing called transhumanism.
Mm-hmm.
I learned many years after that there was a name for the philosophy that had always been mine, since I remember having the use of reason.
So if I get this right, Arthur C. Clarke's book, Childhood's End, was in a way the entry point of you for the ideas behind transhumanism without the explicit awareness of the term and so on.
Yes, that book and other similar books, of course.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, since we are talking of Arthur C. Clarke, I think I must mention, watching like so many people of my generation can remember, that we watched the 2001 when we were very young,
Yes.
and that really changed our life forever, and I think for good.
Yeah, and Stanley Kubrick's film is going to be a classic forever, I
It
think.
is, definitely.
Yeah. So this is how you got sort of pushed towards transhumanism. But what about the idea of the technological singularity? How did that happen?
I'm not really even 100% sure of what you mean by the idea of technological singularity, because as a matter of fact, I have seen an article of yours a few hours ago on the IEET site where you say that there are actually many different definitions of singularity. And you mentioned 17 or 18 of them. And
Yes.
I think there are even many more than that.
I
Perhaps if you ask two different persons what is the singularity, you get two different answers. I stick myself to a not very precise definition, and I'm not very interested in putting a date on that. I don't really care whether singularity happens in 2035 or 2075, or whether we have a few hundred years to wait. I think some very important, very dramatic, very fast, and very radical change will definitely come. And that's what we call singularity. Now, you realize that from my deliberately very loose definition, we can interpret singularity in many different ways. And according to one of these interpretations, we are already living through the singularity now.
Yes.
Because, as a matter of fact, the fact that we have a magic device in our pockets that lets us talk to everyone on the planet in a few seconds and access some very magic thing called the internet would have seemed something absolutely unbelievable and ununderstandable, some kind of future magic
Yes.
to the generation of our grandfather. So from the point of view of my grandfather, I think we are living through the singularity now. From our own point of view, since we are very used to the technology that we have around us, what we call singularity is something that happens in the future when we have even more magic technology around us.
Let me see if I can press you a little bit here on that point, though, because you see, Werner Vinge says that if you take, for example, Mark Twain or a little bit more better than average intelligent person from the 19th century, and you bring them in today, say, take, for example, Jules Verne or somebody else, they would be amazed by all the technological progress that we've made, but in a way, they would understand it. They would be impressed, perhaps, but they would understand it. They wouldn't be unable to, they would not say it's incomprehensible. Now, the technological singularity, though, according to the Werner Vingian sort of meaning of the term, has this event horizon uniqueness of never happening before, in the sense that the difference between now and the moment that the singularity happens will be radically incomprehensible for us in our current form. Just like, say, if you bring a goldfish to our century, or just like a flatworm cannot understand the opera. So the difference of comprehension is humongous. There's an abyss of understanding between the two. So in that sense, your grandfather perhaps doesn't know how the internet works and so on, mobile technology and so on, but he understands the principles are scientific behind it, and in that sense it's not too strange. Do you understand what I mean? And so the general definition of the singularity that I accept usually is the one that talks about this event horizon, radical uniqueness, never occurred before in the past, which separates everything that happened before and after, and the intelligences that deal with it. So after the singularity, when we have the birth of super smart, superhuman intelligence, we, with our own limited cognitive capacity, will not be able to comprehend it from this point of view unless we are beyond, on the other end of the hole, and looking backwards.
Well, I do understand this definition, which, on the other hand, is kind of the standard definition of singularity, if such a thing exists.
Yes.
But I think this way of looking at things is perhaps over dramatized. Let me make another example. Let's not think of our grandfathers, but let's think of people, say, 1,000 of years ago, someone in the Middle Ages. Now, from their point of view, what was important was finding a way to eat every day.
To survive, yes.
Just the very fact that we, at least in our parts of the world, do not have a problem of hunger would have been something ununderstandable from their point of view. And when it comes to water, I am deliberately avoiding to make high-tech examples. I want to make low-tech example. How do you get a water? There is a magic hole in the wall, and water comes out of that magic hole in the wall. Wow, that's fantastic from the point of view of someone who had to walk miles. To get water. If you think of the problems that we faced, think how scared somebody is today seeing the possibility of being a couple of months late in the repayment of a mortgage to the bank, and think that that very concept would have been completely ununderstandable to them. Why am I making this example? Well, I'm making this example because I don't really believe in an event horizon where everything changed from one day to the next. I do think it will be a much more gradual thing that will happen. And I do think that even if the singularity would seem like something ununderstandable from our point of view, it will continue to look like business as usual to those who will live through it. And that's why I was saying a few minutes ago that from the point of view of our grandfathers, we are living through the singularity now. From our point of view, maybe the singularity will happen, I don't know, in the second half of the century. And from the point of view of those who will be alive at that moment, perhaps the singularity will be something that will happen in the future.
Yes. I think it was Marvin Minsky who said that if you're actually riding or surfing on the wave of technological development, then from that point of view, there is no singularity, really, because you are riding the wave.
I agree with that.
Yes. So we spend a little bit of time here talking about the definition of the singularity, which could be very useful to sort of position your ideas. Perhaps it's also good to clear out the other term that we've mentioned here, transhumanism. Now,
hold on one moment, if you permit me coming to the definition. A few years ago, I think it was think it was 2009,
Mm-hmm.
3 years ago, I wrote an article called I, uh, I Am a Singularitan Who Doesn't Believe in the Singularity.
Oh, wow.
And
Interesting.
I think it sums up very well my definition and position on the singularity, in the sense that I don't really believe anything like a singularity will happen according to its standard definition
Mm-hmm.
for the reasons that I just explained.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I very much share, agree, and sympathize with what I may call the singularity mindset.
Mm-hmm.
We would not be here discussing now if we didn't share this mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean by I'm a singularitan who doesn't believe in the singularity.
That's very interesting. I'll try and see if I can find the link to that article and post it
I'll send it.
together with the interview. Fantastic. So perhaps can we move on then to the definition of transhumanism and see if you have a more specific definition about that term, or are you equally broad?
Is a very broad definition as well, I guess. I think transhumanist is just the idea that we can improve the human condition by using advanced technologies. And what the transhumanist thinks is that first, it is something feasible, improving our conditions through advanced technology is something that we can do. And second, it's something desirable. It's something that we should do. I think this is the very central definition of transhumanism that is more or less shared by all transhumanists. Then, of course, we have individual differences regarding so many other points. But I think on this point, everyone who calls themselves a transhumanist would agree.
So when you say this is something that we should do, you mean from an ethical point of view, don't you?
I don't really know what the word ethical means. Of course, I have read many definitions, but I think I don't understand them. Ethics is something too difficult for me. Perhaps I have not studied enough. I think if something results in happiness of many people, then it is something good and we should do it. If something instead makes people unhappy, then it's not good and it's not something that we should do. I really am not interested in any concept of ethics deeper than that. The way I usually express this critique of ethics is, I think, persons are more important than books.
Very interesting. Okay, so can you perhaps tell us then, so you started with the books of Arthur C. Clarke and many others like that, as you said, and in a way, as you've pointed out, broadly speaking, you've been a transhumanist all your life. So what do you do today? I know that you had a few years as a senior manager at the European Space Agency, but now you're a freelancer, I think is what you say on your blog. Can you give us a little better idea of what you do today?
Yes, well, let's start with what I used to do since. So we have been recalling reading Arthur C. Clarke on a beach when I was a child. Let's fast forward to when I was a teenager and a young man, I decided that I wanted to be a scientist. And that, I think, was also a result of direct inspiration from all the good science fiction that I read and watching Neil Armstrong walking on the moon in 1969. For that, I am kind of happy of having been alive in the 60s. I shouldn't be happy, perhaps, because that means I am much older than I would like to be now. But it was really good to live through the space program of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s.
Yeah, the Apollo
Watching
breakthroughs.
watching people walking on the moon, that's something that blows your mind up. What we had after that is not something that I would call space program. But having seen the Apollo program and the very exciting concept of space that we had at the end of the 60s, the 2001 film and all that, I was sure that I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to be involved with science. So I became a theoretical physicist, and I started at the CERN, the European Center for High Energy Physics, where they found, or they think they found, Higgs boson
Yeah.
a few weeks ago. So I stayed there until I moved a few years after that to the European Space Agency. And after that, I became a manager with another part of European administration related to science and technology as well, but very much involved with military research, and that's not really something that I am at liberty to discuss. So a few years ago, I decided that what I was doing was too boring and not interesting enough. And I decided to start on my own. For a few years, I ran a virtual reality design company called Meta Futuring, and we did a lot of very interesting things, mainly related to simulations of real environments and the landscape. For example, one of the things that we did was development in Second Life. And I'm quite happy to say that we did some of the most beautiful things that have ever been done in Second Life. And we worked in many other virtual reality development environments as well. Then the crisis hit, and I didn't have as many clients as I used to have in the golden age of 2006 or 2007. And so mainly I have been working as a writer in the last few years. I collaborate very frequently with the Kurzweil AI online magazine, and sometimes I write for other magazines as well.
By the way, would you mind moving the curtain a little bit more open, because I think the sun has shifted and
Yes.
it's darker.
Yeah. The sun is coming down.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's getting late there too. That's why.
I think I can do something even better. Is it better this way?
I think it is. Oh yes, this is it. This is better. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so what's the motivation then behind all the work that you've done throughout the years at CERN, at the European Space Agency, now at Second Life, and so on? What, if you are to sort of self-analyze yourself, what's your motivation?
It really comes back to what we were discussing a few minutes ago about high and difficult concepts like what is good and what is not good. My real motivation is to be happy, and Doing things that I find interesting makes me happy. Doing things that inspire some sort of beautiful cosmic visions, that kind of things that makes you willing to wake up in the morning and do something good. That makes me happy. Gives me a lot of intellectual enjoyment, and that's the reason why I do what I do. But I would hazard the idea that that's the reason why we all do whatever it is that we do.
That's
So
a
I'm not different from anyone else in this respect.
that's a very Epicurean idea, by the way.
Definitely is.
Yeah. So and I'm a big Epicurean fan. I mean, I love ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, but especially the ancient Greeks. The Epicureans are perhaps one of my favorites. Okay, so let's move on to sort of the more in-depth discussion of the singularity and transhumanism. But before that, I want to make a connection point between those two by asking you this question and see if it's going to work well or not. Are you religious, Giulio?
As all important questions that really deserves a simple answer, and my simple answer is yes and no.
Very
But
simple.
perhaps we can come back to this point. Let's come back. I think if you have been reading
Yeah, I
some
have a
of my
quote actually.
writings recently, then you realize that that's what this kind of things is what I spend most of my time on.
Yes, I have a quote
Perhaps
here
let's
from you.
stay with singularity and transhumanism, and then let's move to this.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so I'll come back to the quote then a little bit later. Then, so then let me ask you this: is the singularity a religion? Because I interviewed Jaron Lanier probably a year ago or so, and Jaron's criticism towards the singularity in general and most singularitarians is that it is what he calls the rupture of the nerds, the religion for geeks. And then he has an argument stemming all the way from, Alan Turing and his, supposed suicide and the original sin and all of that. So, do you agree with that view that the singularity is a religion?
Well, I have been working in the virtual reality field with so many years. How could I ever disagree with Jared Lanier? Yes, I do agree with that.
Yeah, he's considered to
I
be.
don't want to say that singularity is a religion, because that would be wrong, because many people don't think that singularity is a religion. But I can definitely say that transhumanism and the singularity are things that can be interpreted as a religion by those who want to interpret them this way. And in the life of someone who wants to interpret the singularity as a religion, then singularity can play exactly the same role that was usually played by religion in the lives of our grandfathers.
And is there any difference with respect to transhumanism, or is it the same situation there?
I don't make a sharp difference between the concept of singularity and transhumanism. So whatever I say about one can also be applied to the other. As a matter of fact, as I use the words myself, singularity and transhumanism are largely synonymous. I know that not everyone sees things this way, but this is how I use these words myself.
Yeah, because One thing that I've noticed in the communities is that not all singularitarians are transhumanists, perhaps, but even more so, not all transhumanists are singularitarians. I think that's even more true. And I think Max More is one of those people who is perhaps one of the best known transhumanists. I mean, I think he coined the term transhumanism, but I wouldn't say that he would say that he's a singularitarian also.
Well, in fact, Max wrote a couple of years ago an article detailing his own understanding of the singularity, and his position is very similar to my own.
Oh.
In fact, he didn't, I mean, he doesn't like singularity because it gives you the idea of a mathematical discontinuity. And he says, and I agree with him, that that doesn't happen in the real world. It does happen in mathematics, but it does not happen in physics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in mathematics, you have this very neat and very basically simple phenomena, like an ever growing exponential. But when you apply mathematics to the real world of physics, things are not so clean. They are not so simple, and every exponential is always slowed down by some physical effect, like friction and dissipation and heat. And he seems to think that that's exactly how the singularity will play out, and I agree with him. It will be something extremely important. It will be something very fast. It will be something with a huge impact on the world. But he doesn't see a mathematical discontinuity. He doesn't see an event horizon.
Yeah.
And I do very much agree with this more, how to say that without offending anyone, more real world-like interpretation of singularity. As a matter of fact, I usually agree with Max on so many things.
Yeah, and he's a very hard person to disagree with because his arguments are so good. They're so
Yes.
sound. They're so
Exactly.
sound that it's very hard to disagree with. He's
Exactly.
very powerful speaker.
Of course, if I can interrupt, well, maybe we're thinking of something else, but I want to go back to the beginning one moment.
Of
So,
course.
I said that when I was a kid in the 60s, I didn't know there was such a philosophy called transhumanism. Now, of course, like nearly everyone else, I found out about the emerging transhumanist community in the 90s, thanks to the internet. And, if you ask at least 50% of transhumanists, what was the very first thing that you read that made you know that there was a transhumanist community in the world? Then one person out of two, and that includes me, will mention an article appeared on Wired magazine in the middle of the 90s, maybe 94 or 95. It was an article about Max More and Natasha Vitamore, called Meet the Extropians. And it was after reading that article that I say, wow, what I think has a name. I am an extropian. As a matter of fact, I don't even make a very sharp difference between extropianism and transhumanism. These are all different words to convey basically the same thing with some little different shade of meaning, but we are all saying very similar things.
I see. Okay, so perhaps now is the time to to give your quote here about religion, in order to make a connection to the further things that I want to talk about here, about which are the Order of Cosmic Engineers and the Turing Church. So I took this very short paragraph from your blog, where on the topic of religion you say the following. In religion, I understand the position of atheists, but I sympathize with the spiritual approach to reality and values of many believers. In other words, I can live with most combinations of moderate socialism, libertarianism, atheism, spirituality. At the same time, I find fundamentalism, bigotry, and intolerance very annoying, regardless of where they come from.
That's a very good quote, and one which really summarizes very well what I think on so many things. Thank you very much for picking that one.
No problem. I actually have another couple of quotes that I plan to bring here during our interview as points of discussion. So let's move on then. And can you please tell us more about the Order of Cosmic Engineers and the Turing Church?
Right.
One by one, perhaps.
Again, are two very similar things. Different in terms of organization. Now, a few years ago, I had been discussing with a good friend of mine who is interested in the same things that I'm interested in. I don't know if you ever had him on the show. Name is Philippe van Nedervelde.
No, not yet.
He's a quite well-known transhumanist. And hello, Philippe, if you're listening. And
I think we're connected with him on Facebook, actually.
Yeah. He used to be the European representative of Foresight Institute a few years ago. And I believe now he is somehow connected with Russia 2045 initiative. But I believe the best thing you can do is to get in touch with him.
Yes.
So we shared a sensibility to a spiritual attitude that is not very common among transhumanists. So a few years ago, we decided to found a little organization, and that was called Order of Cosmic Engineers. And in fact, even if the website doesn't exist anymore, I imported the list of the people who contributed to the formulation of the first documents on another website, and you really find a lot of great transhumanists. I remember that Max Moore was there, and William Bambridge, and I mean, the list is very long. Howard Bloom was there. There were so many others, and it was really a good group. We ran a mailing list, which was a very active mailing list, in I think 2008 and 2009. And we had a lot of discussions. What we wanted to formulate was what we called, and that was a word invented by Philippe, unreligion. And by that we meant something which has the good parts of religion without having also the bad parts. Now, what happened is that it's very difficult to design a worldview in a committee of people. You know how they say, too many cooks spoil the soup. Because it's very difficult. Because whatever you say, there will always be someone who, for very good reasons, doesn't really agree that that's the right impostation, would like to make some little change in some little extras. There are things on which it's impossible to really agree if you want to formulate that.
Giulio, would you mind if I interrupt you just for one
Sure.
second and ask you to perhaps turn on the light if possible? Because it's starting to get really dark and I cannot see you at all.
Yeah, I understand. Let me see if I can.
Ah, much
Does
better.
this improve things?
Yeah, perfect. Much better. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, but I'm not a nice 25 years old young a girl that everyone wants to look at.
It's okay. I don't have the best haircut in the world myself, but it works.
Right.
It's very aerodynamic, maybe the most aerodynamic.
Oh, well, but I have seen in the London swim games that many swimmers do that to swim faster.
Yeah.
So I think our look is the good one, perhaps.
It's aerodynamic, right? All right, going back to the topic.
Right. Okay. So what I was saying is that we wanted to design a complete worldview, something very ambitious that could replace religion in the mind and in the heart of people, to give happiness to many, many people in the world. And that's something that is very difficult to do in a committee. One has to do that in a very small committee. So the Turing Church is basically an attempt to do that in a very small committee of one. But the idea is the same. To formulate something that on one hand is entirely based on our scientific understanding of the world, while at the same time is able to give the same mental benefits that religion gives. You know, hope in immortality, hope in future resurrection, in sense of a meaning, a sense of a wonder at the marvelous universe that we live in.
So let me stop you here for a second and say that I find this very interesting that you're looking for the intersection of transhumanism and spirituality. That doesn't happen very often at all, especially I think in transhumanist circles. There's perhaps a bit of an aversion towards spirituality. And I want to bring in another quote from you here, from another place that I took, it goes like this. The Turing Church will be a meta-religion without central doctrine, characterized by common interest in the promised land, where science and religion meet. Science becomes religion, and religion becomes science. So I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on that, and then I'll press you a bit on it.
You know, there is not much to elaborate because it's not something very precise. You know, it's not very precise by design. I don't want things to become too detailed, too precise. I don't want to develop a doctrine. I mean, I don't want to do any of that. I'm not interested. What I want to do is to explore spiritual concepts in the light of science and technology with other people who share the same sensibility. So that's why, you know, basically the Turing Church is a discussion group.
So,
it's not anything more... It's not anything different from a discussion group yet. It may evolve in a different direction in the future, or it may not.
Yeah. So let me press you a little bit on this then.
Sure.
Now, you have my sympathies entirely when we speak about spirituality. You know, I, for example, am very interested not only in philosophy, but also in Zen Buddhism. I've always found myself extremely drawn towards Zen Buddhism, perhaps more than anything else, but also a bit of Taoism, Confucianism, and even Hinduism. So I totally sympathize with your spiritual leanings. However, I am very suspicious, as someone who considers themselves an atheist, I am very suspicious of religion in general.
Why?
Well, here's why, and that's my problem here. My sort of instinctive suspicion of this idea that science becomes religion and religion becomes science. Basically, science means that you follow the evidence no matter where it takes you. And so when you start up with a hypothesis, and the evidence takes you to disprove that hypothesis, then you go back and you scratch it off and you start again with another hypothesis. And you keep repeating this process until the evidence confirms the starting hypothesis. And then you start building on top of it, like slowly, right? So this is in a way, perhaps, the scientific method, oversimplified. Religion, on the other hand, so in a way, science starts with doubt, right? You doubt something, you check it with test to verify if it is or if it isn't, and then you either prove or disprove your hypothesis. Religion, on the other hand, starts with the exact opposite. It starts with faith. It starts with...
Who say that?
Well, most religious figures, and even the Bible, they say that God starts with faith. And so if you don't believe, you don't believe. And if you believe, believe. And faith is the basis or the foundation of everything from there on. And so...
if I may interrupt one moment,
Yeah.
especially since you mentioned Zen Buddhism, that's an example of a worldview which is normally described as a religion, to which you cannot apply this definition of religion as something only based on faith that you just gave.
And that's why I love it so much. That's why it resonates with me so well.
Yes.
Right. But
it shows that not necessarily everything which is called a religion must be based uniquely on faith. For example, I don't have any concept of faith at all.
Well, I agree with that, but my concern is that the traditional Judeo-Christian, whether it's Islam or Christianity or the Jewish Torah, basically the idea is very different than the Eastern idea. And that is that, you start with the dogma. And that's what, I mean, I have many problems with religion, but that's one of my biggest problems. So basically, you start with a dogma which, by definition, you cannot negate, regardless of what the experience or the tests reveal to you, right? And so the moment that you refuse to accept that dogma, that starting definition, then you're, by definition, not a Jewish, not a Jew,
Yes.
a Christian, or a Muslim, right? And so, but that for me is the biggest difference between science and religion. In science, there's no really lasting dogmas. There was a dogma about Newton's law of gravity, and then Einstein came along and said, well, but that's not really the case, right? Eventually, things will change even for Einstein's theory of relativity, and that's what science and the scientific method is all about. But if you look at it 2,000 years or 3,000 or more years in the case of Judaism and so on, 1,000 years or so roughly for Islam, things haven't really changed that much. The main dogmas, the main precepts are there, and that's the foundation of religion. And so for me, the problem when you say that, science will become a religion and religion will become science, for me, there's a very strict benefit to separating, just like separating state from church is a crucial thing.
I definitely agree that separating state from church is a crucial thing.
Yes, to have proper society. The same, I think, applies to science. Science, by definition, must never be religious in essence, because you should always be able to go and change your hypothesis, and there should never be dogmas which do not concur with the reality of tests.
I completely agree with that. I call myself a religious person, but I am very much aware that no religion would ever think that I am a good member of it. If I were living in the Middle Ages, for the kind of things that I write, I understand very well that I would have been burned on a stake, like it happened to Giordano Bruno in Campo dei Fiori some like 500 years ago. Well, I'm happy that I do not live in the Middle Age. But, you have been saying many things about a religion, but I just don't think that that is a definition of religion. And in fact, in the case of Zen Buddhism, it does not apply. Now, if you say that, well, it is a fact that Judeo-Christian religions have been very dogmatic and have demanded from the believers a blind faith based on accepting all that the church said. I cannot deny that because it's a fact. But is that really central to what religion is? I think it is not. I think it's an incidental, is a very unfortunate incidental feature of many religions, including the religions that we were born in. But if you think of how these things happen, what lead to oppression, what leads to dogma, what leads to intolerance, is not spirituality, is not ideology, is not philosophy, is something much more concrete, I believe. And Marx saw that very well. These things are only determined by money and power. It's not like the hierarchies of the church oppress believers because they think that is the right thing to do. They do it because they want to keep their power over the believers, and that will help them making more money and getting even more power and so on. We don't have to resort to abstract and very complex philosophical concepts to explain something so simple that, unfortunately, it is in the human nature to try to get as much power as possible over other people. That doesn't have anything to do with philosophy. So, do I agree that these are features that exist in many religions? Yes, of course I do. Do I think that these are the defining features of religion? No, I don't.
Okay,
I
so
think
what
you
could
can define religion in a completely different way that don't include intolerance, don't include dogmatism, are completely compatible with scientific knowledge and with scientific method. And that's the kind of religion that I'm interested in.
So what would be the features that you think are non-incidental to major religions and which you think can benefit science if science were to embrace them?
There are many. One is very basic, is hope. I say that happiness is, I think, a central value. I do consider happiness as a primary value. And it is evident that hope is a necessary condition for happiness. Hope is something very important. Hope is what motivates you to wake up in the morning and do something good. If you have no hope, you don't want to do anything good.
Yeah.
So hope in what? And that's also the reason why we have invented religion. Is well, there are many reasons, of course, but I think this is the most important one. We have invented religion because you don't want to accept the idea that we will die, and especially the idea that we will not see our loved ones who are already dead anymore. That's something that completely destroys your happiness and doesn't let you live, doesn't allow you to live a good life. That's the reason why our ancestors invented religion. And you find that in every religion that has existed on the planet, there is a concept of resurrection in an afterlife. It's very different from religion to religion. The Christian concept of heaven is quite different from the Islamic one,
Yes.
for example. But you will see your loved one again in an afterlife.
Yes.
Uh, this is what our ancestors thought, and it's very easy to see that this has a big survival value at the societal level, because if you can hope in something, you are a better fighter, or you are a better hunter, or a better farmer, or a better worker. So you need hope, and specifically, you need hope in resurrection in an afterlife. Now, our ancestors were not able to even remotely imagine any mechanism for that. So they had to invent the concept of supernatural. They invented, well, okay, so perhaps our world has been created by a god that is completely outside the universe, doesn't have to obey anything like physical laws, and so on. This is the origin of the concept of supernatural, upon which much of the religious doctrine, including dogmas, has been based. Now, I think you agree with me so far, don't you?
Yes.
Now, let's go back to your definition of science, which is also my definition of science, which means that you have to make a hypothesis, then you have to go and
Test.
follow what you find, experimental,
Yes.
until wherever it leads you. And that's how science works. You don't do science with preconceived notions of where you want science to lead you. You follow science and you follow experiment. Now, it seems to me, as a scientist, as someone who studied to be a scientist and has continued to follow science since a very long time, it seems to me that science will enable us to hope in resurrection in an afterlife again. And I'm talking of the concept of technological resurrection, which in the Christian world was introduced, for example, by Russian mystic Nikolai Fyodorov at the end of the 19th century. He was the first one who dared to formulate this so astonishingly beautiful concept that science may one day be able to resurrect the dead. He was not the first one. He was not the last one. The same concept has been explored by modern thinkers like Hans Moravec, like Frank Tipler in his Physics of Immortality. This seems like quite a tough thing to do for the future generation. Do I have any idea of what science and what technologies our descendants will use to resurrect the dead from the past? No, I don't have the foggiest idea, because I don't think our understanding of science enables us to even begin to imagine the kind of super science upon which that may depend. But I do think that this may be a possibility for future generation, not for the next generation. I'm not imagining things that may happen in a couple of 100 years. This cannot happen in a couple of 100 years. In fact, if you read Frank Tipler's book, you see that he imagined resurrection after billions of years at the physical end of the universe. There have been other writers who have imagined some possible mechanisms for resurrection that may happen much before the billions of years that we have to wait for the end of the physical universe. But I don't want to speculate on the details of how that can happen, because I don't think I know enough to speculate on this. I just want to speculate on the fact, the high level concept that science and technology may permit resurrecting the dead from the past. Now, this is the central concept of religion, and I think this is what is really important. Hierarchies and dogmas and holy inquisitions and holy war and all that, all these things have happened. I'm not denying that these things happen, but what I do say is that these are really incidental things. And the real definition of religion is what I just gave. And it is very much oversimplified, of course, but the definition of religion is something that lets you hope in an afterlife where you can be resurrected together with the persons that you loved. It's a very simple definition. And I think this very simple definition is completely compatible with our current scientific understanding of the universe. So the way I like to describe this is that it is like, religion had been thrown away by the back door of superstition, but now he's coming back through the main door of science. Because once you forget all the incidental superstructure of religion, as you say, something very much dogmatic, what you are left with? You are left with something simple. You are left with something very beautiful. You are left with something scientifically sound, like this central idea that science and technology may in the future be able to resurrect the dead. And that's religion coming back from the main door of science.
That's very interesting. It's a fascinating idea. Well, Giulio, time is advancing here, so I would like I have about three more questions that I'd like to ask you, so perhaps we can do that within the next 5 to 10 minutes.
Sure.
To bring it to an end. But let me just ask you this, to sort of challenge everything that what you just said. I want to bring in a third quote from you today. And another quote from somebody else that I interviewed on this show too. So the quote from you goes like this: "My worldview in a nutshell. I appreciate that our complex world is complex, and I am very suspicious of simple black and white truths, magic formulas, and one-size-fits-all solutions." So that's perfectly straightforward. I entirely agree with it. However, now, keeping in the back of our minds ideas such as transhumanism and the technological singularity, here's what Charlie Stross, who is one of my favorite science fiction writers, said.
And mine.
Well, here's what Charlie said on my show. He said, "The world is complicated. Elegant narratives explaining everything are wrong. and he was specifically referring to the technological singularity. So what would you like to say about that?
Again, he's one of my favorite writers. And how can I ever disagree with something that Charlie Strauss says? Of course he's right. Of course there is no one-size-fits-all explanation for anything.
And don't you think that both me and you are kind of committing perhaps this idea of embracing a little too much a single, convenient, straightforward, easy to understand, a little bit more or less black and white idea in the form of transhumanism and the technological singularity?
Well, I don't think it's straightforward, and I don't think it's that simple. I do adopt this worldview because it's the system of thought that I like to use. You know, it's something like a shirt. I'm wearing a, well, you're wearing a shirt of the same color than I am. That means we both like blue shirts. That's the reason why I didn't wear a yellow shirt and you didn't wear a red shirt, because we both prefer blue. And that's the same thing with singularity and transhumanist. I'm very much aware. I want to make a quote from someone who is not one of my friends. In fact, from someone who does criticize me a lot. I believe you must be familiar with him. His name is Dale Clarke. He teaches humanities at University of Berkeley. Now, that would be an interesting guest to have on the show. Anyway, he does criticize me and other transhumanists really a lot, but sometimes he says interesting things. And one thing that he said once is that our transhumanist aspirations constitute the stained window that colors our everyday perception of the world. And that is completely right. Also in the sense of Charlie Strauss, it is a choice. It is a choice that we have made. Both you and I have made the choice of wearing a shirt of this color, and we have made the choice of seeing the world to this specific color. In this sense, it's not surprising. It's just a personal choice.
Very interesting. Giulio, it's time to bring our conversation to an end with the last two questions that I always ask of guests on my show. So the first one is, where can people find more about you and your work?
It's scattered. I mean, I'm very easy to find on Google, but I remember that you started the show by reading from the Wikipedia page about me.
Yes.
And that page needs very much to be updated. So in the meantime, I would recommend to start there. But let's make something even more interesting. I guess you will write something about this interview.
Yes.
Together with the video. So what I will do, I will send you the 4 or 5 most significant and actual and interesting starting points.
Okay,
excellent. In the meantime, just Google me.
I see. And I'll, of course, include those links in the article together with publishing this interview. Okay, so the final and perhaps the most important question that I always ask of my guests is this. Giulio, do you have a single message or the most important thing that you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from this interview with you today?
I think we have already covered that in more detail. But what I would like to remind all viewers is that death is not the end. Science and technology are not supernatural God, but future science and technology may be able to resurrect us in the future. As simple as that.
Very interesting. I hope you're right, but even if you're not, there's so much we can talk about just this one topic that
But you know, Nicola, it's not a dogma. It's not something that has to be right because it's written on some books. It's something that we have to do ourselves. You see my point?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, I don't say that I am right. I never think that I'm right. I'm just saying that what
it's possible.
We have been discussing, I think, is very much compatible with our scientific understanding of the world.
Yes.
But it will not happen because it's written on a notebook. It will happen if scientists and engineers and ourselves and our children and our grandchildren and future generation make it happen. So what I think I'm right. I hope I'm right.
I hope so too.
Now, let's suppose I'm not right. That nothing of that will happen because the human race will be wiped out by an asteroid in a couple of 100 years. In that case, I'm not right. Well, perhaps some alien civilization will engineer resurrection, but it will not be us. But even in that case, I think a worldview based on something good that will happen in the future if we make it happen is also a very powerful motivating factor for ourselves here and now, regardless on whether it happens in actuality or not. Because what do we have to do in order to enable our future children to develop resurrection technology? We have to continue developing science and technology. But now, first, something more important first. We have to make sure that our species continue to exist. That means we have to avoid war. We have to colonize space because we cannot remain confined here on a little planet for too long time.
Yes.
In order to achieve future scientific resurrection, what we have to do are all the things that we have to do anyway. Living in peace on the planet, ensuring a better world for future generation, colonizing space, overcoming our instinct to fight each other all the time. And you see, these are things that we have to do because they are the good things to do, and exactly the same things will enable our descendants to develop magic technology. And that's something that really makes you get out of bed with happiness in the morning because you have something to do. So I think I'm right. But even if I'm not right, perhaps I'm right anyway.
All right, and I think, as I said, as I was saying, that there's so much we can talk about that one topic alone that I might get tempted to invite you again on the show sometime later on.
I will be always happy to come back, and I would like to express again my thanks together with all the transhumanist community for the really excellent work that you are doing with these podcasts.
Oh, thank you very much. I think you're making me blush, and I'm not easy to blush actually at all.
Thank you very much, Nicole.
Thank you very much, Giulio. I really appreciate you being with us today.